I'm Liz, and welcome to Kessel Fun, the official podcast of the Star Wars speculation subreddit. And these are my co-hosts.
Vinny 5, standing by.
Hi, I'm Lai.
Hi, I'm Todd.
And for our first segment today, we have some good news. The Star Wars Resistance show trailer released this morning, and we got a glimpse at what the art style looks like and what date it's going to come out on. So it's coming out on October 7th. It's a Sunday, and it's going to be released at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Well, I was looking at it, and Filoni had said beforehand that he was heavily inspired by anime, and boy, does that come through pretty strong when you're looking at it. It's 3D cel-shaded, looking essentially like Ruby from Rooster Teeth, if you're familiar with that. And, boy, I'm torn because I really love the art style of the Clone Wars. And I really love the art style of Rebels. I think it got progressively better and better, and it referenced Ralph McQuarrie's fantastic original Star Wars concept art as much as possible. And now we're getting this radically different thing, and radically different isn't always a bad thing. It can be great. But, my first impression, my knee-jerk reaction, which obviously is the reaction I should use and is the most logical, obviously, is that it's looking to appeal to a younger audience, just visually alone. I'm not really sure it does the show too many favors. Someone asked me what I thought of the ship designs, and I said, well, I can't really tell much from the ship designs because between the cel shading, which kind of muddles the lines, and the bloom, which is turned way up, I'm not seeing as much of it as I'd like to. I wish they wanted to show off those models, and the art style just seems to muddle it all for me.
I thought the protagonist looks like Takashi from Voltron, the one that's, I think, the Netflix series, right? And even though it does look catered towards younger audiences, I thought the premiere time was interesting because it's 10 p.m. and isn't that a little late for kids? So I don't know. I thought that was interesting, and that they're premiering it on Disney Channel versus XD on for the first episode. Vinny, do you know, as far as TV show business, why that would be, or?
I genuinely don't. I found that curious as well because the biggest defense you're hearing for this show is, well, it's a kids show, it's aimed at kids, and yet they're premiering it right before a school night after the watershed. I know the watershed isn't really a thing anymore, but it's still, for those who are not familiar with the watershed, it's the time at night after which you're allowed to swear and show breasts and nudity and whatever on television. Mm-hmm. And this is very much after the watershed on a school night, so I don't really understand the logic there.
Okay.
Maybe it's because they're trying to slowly sneak it in, is my thought. Because when the kids wake up in the morning, maybe they will have a rerun of it, like early in the morning, so the kids could watch. And I definitely think they would be showing it probably like after school times. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, they do release some stuff on Disney Channel before they move it to XD, because isn't it switching to XD after that?
Oh, is it? Okay.
I thought so. It would make the most sense.
Conglomerate?
I think because Disney Channel has more viewers than Disney XD. So it just makes sense for it to stream on there first and then move it to XD, because most of the kids that watch cartoons that are mostly like, I don't want to say like aimed at boys, but that kind of thing, like they show like Spider-Man, Avengers, like all that stuff on XD, so it would make sense to move it over there.
Yeah, and something they've been doing recently is having shows premiere on Disney Channel and Disney XD. I know to get more people interested or reach a broader audience so they know about it. So now it's happened with a lot of their shows, like you said. A lot of the animation, like Rebels and all the Marvel shows, do go on to Disney XD, while still having like a episode or two on Disney Channel. It's like get people interested or just reach out to another audience. Yeah, so the art style was exactly what I expected it to be based off of the description and the image that we got from the beginning, so that didn't put me off, especially because I was prepared for it. So I was focusing more on the story and what little we got of it, and it isn't too interesting for me so far of what we've seen, but it has potential to be. Like, I rewatched the Rebels trailer, and that was all from the first episode, so if this is all from the pilot, I can forgive it and give it a chance to see where it goes. As far it isn't jumping out to me, but I am interested to see where it could go.
Well, the comparisons to anime are going to be hard to avoid, at least for me. One of the most common things you see in shonen anime, which are anime aimed at younger boys, Dragon Ball, stuff like that, is there's a tournament. There's some sort of tournament, it's card battle tournament or racing tournament or fighting tournament, and that's how they kind of fill time between the actual progressing of the plot. And it seems that's what's happened here. It's supposed to be about an espionage, this kid sent behind the lines in the Outer Rim or unknown regions to spy for the First Order. I'm like, okay, you have my attention. Oh, wait, no, we're diverting all of our resources to this race and this tournament. And I'm not nearly as interested in that at all.
I'm really hoping that isn't like the focus of the show, because I can see it being it, but I can also see it being like the start or the first episode, just as the pilot. That's definitely something that crossed and worried my mind about this.
I'm noticing a theme now. We had Phasma, who had her custom silver chromed out with spinners armor, and we had Cardinal, who is from the Phasma book, and he's essentially Phasma but red. And I noticed for a flash second in the trailer we had a gold Phasma, and it didn't look like it was an effect of the lighting. It looked like a whole different character. I don't know who that person. I don't know who that person is supposed to be, but I paused it, and it definitely looks like a gold Phasma, essentially.
It does.
So maybe we get a new officer character.
I saw that screenshot, and I think we have Cardinal and Phasma who have their own special armors. So I think that it's going to be a thing with the First Order Stormtrooper captains to have their own armor, like we have Cardinal's red and Phasma's chrome, and now this gold guy.
And didn't we get a confirmation that Leia's going to be in this show?
Didn't we?
I forgot. It was that one tweet that said that Leia will be in the show, and this other voice actor, of course, will be doing her voice. So, yeah, I think that's going to be pretty cool to have Leia there. I think we talked about how Phasma is going to be there, and...
Yeah.
Did they confirm Hux in the original?
I think they... I'm not sure if they confirmed Hux, but I want to say yes. Don't quote me on that, though.
Okay.
The only other thing I want to ask you guys is, what do we think the over-under is on Poe staying in the series? Because it's Oscar Isaac, and he costs, money. So I don't see him being in the show past the first episode, maybe the second. Like, there's no way he's a regular, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I can see him being on the whole show. My gut instinct right now is to say he's going to be in the pilot to, ease it in. Maybe show up at, the season finale or something big or whatever. But definitely not a regular.
I wonder who's going to be the Resistance leader then, if not Leia or Poe. For this guy, at least.
I was just saying I'm not sure there's going to be one at all. It seems to be very disconnected from the Resistance First Order storyline.
Okay.
Looks like he's just on his own thing, on his own mission, being undercover, doing whatever.
Wasn't someone was teaching him, bomb disarmament techniques for, a flicker of a second, and they were saying, oh, I'm not going to be, beyond this, I'm not going to be a part of your spy mission or something.
Oh, yeah, no, in the trailer, there's that alien, and he's got the brown spiked face. I forget what race he is, but for half a second he goes yeah, I'm not interested in the spy part of your life. You mentioned earlier that you were watching the Rebels trailer and comparing it to this one and how it was equally lighthearted. But did it have any clear distraction in it? Yes, we're talking about the war, but we're also talking about him, I don't know, playing sports or farming. Did it have a big diversion like this one did as well?
No, I'd definitely say that this is a lot more... Well, the Rebels trailer still looks better to me than this, for the reasons that you've said. The Rebels still turned out a lot better than the trailer suggested, so I have some hopes here.
So, as we speak, my brother just texted me his reaction to this, and he is such a huge Star Wars fan. He grew up with the original trilogy. He loves Rebels, and he loves Clone Wars, and he loves PT. He is kind of iffy on ST stuff, But his reaction is, I don't know about that new Star Wars Resistance cartoon, sad face. And I'm going to be asking him why. I'm really curious if it seems too cartoony to him. Like, he doesn't really watch any anime. The only cartoons he really watched were Rebels and Clone Wars, and he really enjoyed those. So it's very interesting to see someone kind of outside of, looking at all this canon stuff and everything like that, react to the cartoon like that. All right, so we'll move it over to Todd and the continuity errors found in Vader Annual Volume 2.
So in this issue, it focuses on Darth Vader investigating or helping out with the Death Star project. And it's a good issue. I liked it except for the ending, which featured a scene where it's implied, I believe, that Vader sent a messenger or sent something to Lyra while she was out on a planet working, getting the kyber crystals, doing the research, that basically straight up told her about the Death Star, and that's what, Krennic was actually having Galen work on. And that doesn't line up with what we see in Catalyst at all, especially since I had just finished reading Catalyst before reading this issue. I was like, huh? Because it's not, first off, it's never brought up, it's never mentioned, and it doesn't fit with the natural progression of the story at all. Definitely a jarring issue that the story group said they'd be trying to avoid going forward. It's interesting I say that manifesto is starting to weaken a little bit.
Yeah, it really bugs me because I'm a big fan of the old canon, and Disney had to sell me on the idea of rebooting the canon. And one of the big selling points was, no, I know I can already tell you guys are a little, oh no, he's going on a rant. I'll try and restrain myself as best I can. One of the selling points was, don't worry, you're not going to have the big disastrous mess that was the old canon of authors not talking to each other, characters not acting like each other in the various forms that they're in, Vader comic versus movie Vader, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, okay, you'll keep a tighter rein on things. You'll have fewer books coming out, certainly fewer games coming out, and so you'll have less story to wrangle with. And that seems to have been shot in the leg fairly early on. We're 4 years into Disney's tenure as keepers of Star Wars, and already we've got some canon issues. Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this. Is anyone here a fan of the Aftermath books that Chuck Wendig wrote?
I haven't read them personally.
I mean, I have my gripes with the first one, and I really don't like the writing style, so
I agree with you.
The story was there, but I didn't like the way he actually wrote the book, if that makes sense.
I completely agree. I'm very much not a fan of those books. I think the third one was okay. There are a couple standout moments, like Sinjir Valus, the gay ex-Imperial intelligence officer. But overall, yeah, I feel they're some of the weakest books in the entire new canon. And for him to then kind of casually, stomp all over this story of Catalyst, which is one of my favorite books in the new canon, really rubbed me the wrong way. But what made it worse is his reaction to it all, how he responded to the fans when the fans called him out on his nonsense.
Well, I thought it was interesting that this happened because I remember when we were talking about the interviews with the Dr. Aphra comic creators and writers, they were talking about how strict the story group is about canon and where they're allowed to go and what they're allowed to include. So I thought this was interesting that it even happened. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about how this continuation error affects the rest of canon and the implications. So let's have this conversation, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and what really bugs me here is that the Vader comics have already had a big issue with canon in issue 13, where they have the wrong dates, characters showing up that have already died, ships showing up that won't be in production for years, And I saw a lot of things about that online, and you'd think that they'd have a tighter leash, especially since it's the same comic and the same things happening.
I was just going to say, Lai, you raised an interesting, a very good point about the story group and how they were keeping a tighter grip on it, because I was following the Battlefront 2, the EA Battlefront 2 debacle quite closely because I enjoyed the game. How dare I know, as the hate mail comes in. And one of the things they mentioned was that
You EA fan.
I know my EA check is probably in the mail. I should go get it right now for shilling so hard for them. But I was reading one of their announcements was, hey, we're trying to get more skins in the game. We're trying to get more content in the game. But everything we do, every level, every vehicle, every weapon has to be sent through Lucasfilm. They have to look at it. They have to approve it. They have to send it back to us. It's a multi-week, sometimes month-long process to get anything approved. So for that to be holding up a premier flagship video game title, and then for this comic, probably one of the most popular comics because it's already spawned multiple spin-offs, Dr. Aphra and such, for that to slip through, I don't get the inconsistency going on there.
I agree with everything you guys are saying. I really thought they should have had a hold of this better, especially now from realizing, Todd, you mentioned that in issue 13 there are people that are alive that are not supposed to be alive, ships that are not supposed to be there. That's really messy, and I think they should reconsider their methods to pre-approving things, or like having a check and balance system when it comes to comics, especially because that's the one constant new content we are getting. So we want to know that everything is correct, and that, you know, when we're talking about this amongst ourselves, like, oh, this is canon, this is not canon, like things like that. They got rid of old canon for a reason, and to start up this new canon, and now it's kind of just everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like Vinny said, that they're holding up such a high standard for Battlefront 2, like, you know, approving everything, and yet for what's basically their flagship comic book, they've let a huge continuity error happen again. It just seems like they need to get a better hold on things.
Yeah, and, you know, the thing is, I would think that if you're working on something as big as a Vader comic, you would definitely immerse yourself as an author, right, or as a writer. You would definitely want to immerse yourself in the material surrounding that timeline, especially something as big as Galen's involvement and Lyra's involvement in this project, and also, you know, the Death Star itself. So I don't know. It just kind of baffles me that an author wouldn't do their homework, especially since there's a whole freaking book on this, you know?
Yeah, and what really irks me is that the way he had actually had Lyra and Jin, like, on the planet makes it seem like he just read the Wikipedia article of the book, and he's like, oh, they're here, I'll just put them in here and have this happen, instead of, like, actually reading it, and
Right.
That's really getting to me. Just feels kind of lazy in a way to try and shove in a reference in there.
Yeah.
I think my bigger problem with the whole thing is his response. Like, this sort of thing can be fixed. They can go in, they can release a little note to the fans and just go like, hey, this person was miscommunicated, this person got convenient amnesia. There's a million ways to fix this. But his response to the fans, when the fans all went on his Twitter and go, yo, you're messing with the canon, man. And his comment is, people take canon too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's condescending to the fans, going, no, it's not me. It's not my glossing over and not really paying attention to this thing you care about. It's your problem for caring too much, is how his response came off. And that, I think, really made all this much worse.
Yeah, and from what I've read or what I've seen, he hasn't had that great of a presence online either, with previous interactions with fans about the Aftermath books. And like when people criticize him, he brings up the having gay characters in there and trying to do that. Lucasfilm needs to get their PR guys to have a talk with him.
Yeah, that was one of my notes. Needs PR training. I think you can definitely, of course, be defensive as a creator for the Star Wars universe, and you can, of course, you know, justifiably so say, hey, you know, this and that, but I think something as blatant as that people take canon too seriously is a little too much, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so Thrawn Alliances, the much anticipated sequel to Timothy Zahn's glorious return to the canon with Thrawn, came out, and it's got hot young Thrawn and Clone Wars Anakin's space adventures and adventures of Padme, and later Thrawn with Vader in Mid Rebels, and it's out. And what did you guys think of it? Lai, what did you think of it first off?
I loved it a lot more than the first Thrawn book. This one had so much more personality to me than the first Thrawn, and you know, I'm a Anakin Vader like fangirl, so obviously I freaking loved like them going back and forth to Vader and Anakin, and I love that it was like the TCW version of Anakin because he's charming, he's charismatic, and young Vader is very, is like a petulant child that always wants his way but can't because the Emperor gave as much power to Thrawn as he gave to Vader. So that's what I really loved about it.
So in terms of the book, I finished it pretty quickly. I enjoyed it, and I thought the little tidbit at the end of like this, little spoilery thing that happened was really nice. I was expecting more, but I don't know what more I could have gotten out of it, if that makes sense. There was a lot of cute moments with Anakin and Padme and Thrawn. Like that whole interaction was just amazing. And Thrawn kind of taking a liking to Padme, just realizing how brilliant she is and like why Anakin is so into her. And all the interactions with Thrawn and Vader later on, how they're so kind of hostile to each other but also buddy-buddy. It's like really weird.
Yeah, like you guys have brought up, one of the highlights of the book was the Thrawn, Anakin, Padme, and the Thrawn, Vader interactions. Seeing those personalities go off each other. Certainly great. My general thoughts, I really like this book. I like the first Thrawn book, but I feel like this one was more engaging. Like, had more going on. Not that seeing Thrawn's rise up the Empire was not that interesting, but the B-plot in this one, with the whole Anakin, Thrawn, Padme thing, was certainly a lot more interesting than the Price subplot of the first book. Especially Thrawn himself feels a lot more in character than he did in Rebels to me. And especially in the last scenes of the book with the battle scene, that felt like it could have been directly from the Thrawn trilogy to me. Just the way Zahn wrote it reminded me heavily of it. I don't know if that's just me, but it felt a lot like Thrawn, certainly more than anything I've seen so far in the new canon.
For me, I'm just not to reiterate what you guys have said so far, but I agree that it's a much stronger story than the first Thrawn book. I feel like the first Thrawn book was just to reintroduce him to people who weren't familiar with him, and I don't feel like much happened in the first Thrawn book other than, hey, here is Thrawn, he's a cool guy, look at all the cool things he's doing, boy, he sure is cool, isn't he? That's all I got out of the first book. It was almost masturbatory over how cool Thrawn is, and this seems to have real character progression to it. One of my things is that it did for me, and this is almost tangential, but it sold Clone Wars Anakin and Padme to me, because when I was looking at the Anakin and the Padme parts, and in my head I'm trying to picture Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman in those parts and reading those lines, and I'm not seeing it or hearing it at all. And then I try and put Clone Wars, Matt Lauer, Anakin and Padme there, and it fit perfectly. And it kind of drove home to me the difference between those two groups of characters and how everyone's grasp of who Anakin and who Padme are is now significantly shifting towards their Clone Wars versions versus their prequel versions.
Yeah, I definitely went through the same thing when I first started reading the book in those passages. It was just a lot easier to hear the Clone Wars characters and their voices, since that really is like my version of the characters, since Clone Wars is what I grew up with even more so than the prequels.
Well, plus, there's so much more, of course, the Clone Wars show is a lot longer than all the films. So,
yeah,
seeing all the in-between is awesome.
I really do feel like they're becoming the definitive versions of the characters, especially with the fan base.
Yeah, there's I took a couple screenshots throughout reading the book, and I love how Anakin is so possessive of Padme to the point where it's really scary. There's this one part in the book where he finds out that she has been like kidnapped, or not kidnapped, but like she's missing at one point. And it says, if Padme was here, if they'd hurt her, her attackers would need to suffer a little before they died. And I'm just like, whoa there, boy. You're getting kind of scary here. Yeah, it's very possessive of him. A little of kind of what we see, during Clone Wars and like the Clovis part. It just reminded me of that.
Yeah. There's a little drinking game I like to play in my head whenever I'm watching Clone Wars, where I count the times that he gives off a red flag of he might be kind of edging towards the dark side. Someone probably should have picked up on this by now, I would think. And there were exactly like that. There were several of those moments in Thrawn Alliances where it's just like, yeah, this is weird that he somehow turned to the dark side. Who could have possibly seen that coming?
All these masters on the Jedi Council, but no one could detect it. It's so funny.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it's not funny, obviously.
It's a little funny.
Jedi genocide.
Oh.
A little funny.
Also, another quote that I liked. A remarkable person, Thrawn said. An equally remarkable association you have with her, is what Thrawn is talking to Anakin about Padme.
The way Thrawn, like, just casually mentions, like, he knows, he, like, can tell their relationship.
Yeah, he can tell it's
and even,
very
like,
observant.
later in the book, when he's just casually dropping things to Vader. It's like, oh, the last time we were on this planet together, and he's like, I've never visited this planet. Shut up, Thrawn.
Right.
Todd, you mentioned earlier how, especially in the last battle, Thrawn, this younger Thrawn, is starting to feel more like the older, wiser Thrawn that we had in the old canon. And I definitely agree with you. And this, especially when his competency starts to shine there in the book, he kind of starts to separate himself from Rebels Thrawn, who seems to not be quite as competent, or at least not have his plans fall into place as much as we're told to believe they should. Like I'm starting to see more of a contrast between him and his Rebels portrayal, where I know the good guys have to win, but man, do they have to win so much against Thrawn?
Yeah, and one of the things that really felt off about in the Rebels finale was when Thrawn started, like, bombarding the Lothal, which is something that I don't think he would do based off of the books that we've had so far. Especially in the first book. Like, he was really against the whole civilian casualties thing, so that was really, really out of character, even especially with, all those defeats and everything. It's kind of weird seeing that.
I was just going to say, in conclusion to your point, it seems like Zahn has, obviously as the one who made Thrawn, he has a much better grasp on Thrawn, and Filoni, is just not disrespecting the character, but doesn't have as good a grasp on Thrawn, and is more just using him as a slightly more interesting figure or toy to play with in his set piece.
Yeah, pretty much.
Some of my favorite parts were the three brothers. Was it three brothers? I think it was the three brothers that were helping Padme. I thought that was interesting because we can see Padme's sort of espionage side to her, because she had to, like, hide, and she even came up with a plan of, like, memorizing all the security points and all the droids that were, like, surveying the hallways. And it was cool to, like, hear Padme, like, talk about that stuff, because obviously in the films and especially the show, she's more, of course, on the more political side. We don't really get to see her in action that much, and it was cool seeing this, like, like, oh crap, like, Padme can, like, come up with an escape plan. And the fact that she was, like, super fearless about it and was like, I don't care, get me those clothes and tell me all the checkpoints, tell me this and that, and I'll memorize this, and I'm gonna, like, go for it, you know what I mean? I'm gonna take this factory down. So I thought that was cool. And then just my last favorite part was, I don't know how to say this, Mokvij. That factory reminded me of the droid factory that Anakin, Luminara, Ahsoka, and Barriss attacked in season 2, episode 6, because the droid commander there said, the super tanks aren't ready, but when they are, they'll have no weapon that can penetrate its heavy armor. And in this droid factory, there's this, like, super strong material that they're creating, and I thought that was a cool parallel to the Clone Wars. I definitely noticed that, so I thought that was cool.
And that's an excellent point, because that's another piece of old canon that they're using Thrawn as a pivot point to bring into new canon, which is the cortosis, a material that can stand up to blasters and, more importantly, lightsabers. in the old canon and especially Tor and stuff, there was stuff everywhere that could counter lightsabers. There were vibro swords, vibro blades, cortosis, all sorts of stuff that could counter lightsabers. And obviously that would be a bit broken to have it everywhere in the current canon when they're trying to tone that stuff down. But, to acknowledge its existence was very, very cool.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna reply to what Lai was going on, saying the whole... it's kind of like a running thing in the Clone Wars for, like, the Separatists to have, like, a secret weapon or, like, a secret factory. Developing the sort of thing with, like, the Malevolence, the droid factory that they went to with the super tanks, this Cortosis armor. And, again, it was definitely a part that helped the feel of Clone Wars come out to me, in addition with having the characters more relevant to their portrayals there.
Okay. Well, one other topic I found very interesting that I want to hear you guys' opinion on is there's a report that came out that apparently Zahn originally wanted to use Ahsoka instead of Padme in that role to serve that purpose in the B story. And I look at certain parts and I'm trying to figure out how that would have changed the story for me and how it would have changed how he approached the characters and how they approached each other. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that would have been interesting to see how Ahsoka fits into here. Because Lai brought up earlier, or was it you, Vinny, that we can see Anakin, like, more dark side tendencies here. And I feel like that really stepped up when Ahsoka left. That was a huge tipping point for him. So I don't know if we would get as much, or if it'd be a more tempered Anakin with her around. I think it could have changed his characterization a bit. Also, trying to figure out how she'd fit in there, if she'd be with Padme, or if she'd be with Anakin, or if she'd take the place of Padme. I don't know how the development process worked there, or how she'd fit in, but it's definitely interesting to think about and look at.
I could definitely see the switch of Padme and Ahsoka just by how possessive Anakin was about finding her. We've seen multiple times in Clone Wars that Anakin is, like, really, really possessive of Ahsoka, but more so, like, trying to protect her. Yeah. And a good episode about that is when she got lost on that planet, and it was like Hunger Games sort of thing, and she found those other Jedi. Like, Anakin was, like, going crazy trying to figure out where she went and, like, what happened to her. So reading this and then inserting Ahsoka into that, I can see how it would change some things, but how it would also work really well. And also in the beginning of the book, he mentions that he misses her. So, having the timeline, I think, would have changed. It would have, right? Because the Padme thing happened after Ahsoka left, correct?
Yeah, the Padme parts of the book and everything happened much after Ahsoka left. So definitely a different time in Anakin's life, I think.
Yeah, it would.
I agree with everything you guys are saying, and I could totally see Ahsoka, doing all of this, like, sneaking around and eventually getting to Anakin when she realizes that he's there and breaking him out, or trying to. But obviously it would change the romantic aspect and of course turn back into the Master Padawan thing. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought I would have loved to see Ahsoka be in this book, but I don't know how they would transition Padme's handmaiden, like, because she was the one that gave Padme the information, right? That something was going on.
Yeah. I feel like if anything changed, it would definitely be that part of the book.
Yeah. And sort of Padme's motivation to, go there. But also, I thought it was cool that they showed Padme pay respect to her friend, or her handmaid, with that morning song, the song, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was cool, and that Padme was in this gritty bar, like, all by herself, and, like, going on this mission. I don't know. I liked. I mean, of course, I liked Padme in this too.
Yeah, that was a really good moment between her and her former handmaidens, and we are getting the Padme novel coming out soon, so I think we're going to see more of her relationships with them, if not, she specifically showing up in that book as well.
There was one other thing, and this was very weird to me because it was very meta. The planet that a good portion of the story takes place on, most like the first third to first half of the book takes place on, is Batu. And we know now that that's the in-universe location of their new Star Wars theme park. And I kept trying to get that idea out of my head, like stop trying to picture yourself going to this theme park. But I know Disney did that on purpose. They said, hey, use Batu, because this is kind of this meta advertising thing they've got going for this theme park they're building. And that, it didn't really ruin the experience for me, but it definitely tainted it. Because I kept looking for things in the writing to sell me on the idea of, oh, okay, so this is going to be a theme park. This is going to be a physical location. This is going to be merchandise. And it almost tainted the reading, the enjoyment of it, knowing that that was some sort of meta advertising that Disney was doing for their new theme park. Did anyone else get that?
I managed to forget that for a great portion of reading this book, but like you said, there's things that pop out, like basically your general Star Wars planet. You got a cantina, you got these buildings, aliens, the whole atmosphere. And I don't know, Vinny, if you brought this up, but someone in the Star Speculation Discord did. But there's a scene in the book where Thrawn and Anakin are like searching around trying to find parking and trying to find a way to like get onto the planet.
Yes!
I don't know if that was someone putting out a meta joke there or something about Disneyland.
Yeah, that was me, and I do feel like that was a meta joke. Almost like a too self-aware for its own good, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact that the planet is the planet that Galaxy's Edge is based on, it didn't really bother me. I thought if anything was cool, but then again, I mean, the mouse owns my life, so again, I don't have to say that, but I was very interested in learning more about the planet because therefore I have things to look forward to when I actually go into the land and look at how they make the environment more interactive. But from what I'm seeing being built to what I saw and visualized in the book, it doesn't really look like it. So that's kind of sad. But again, that was a different part of the planet that they went to than what is going to be made in Galaxy's Edge.
It was also, I give credit to Nian. He's the one that pointed out to me that Black Spire was already mentioned in the Solo movie when L3 and Lando were talking to each other, and she said that he couldn't even get to Black Spire without her. So, Disney's definitely trying to insert, Batu up in there. But I don't know if I was talking to you guys or if it was my older brother, who's such a nerd also. Hi, Queer Earl. I think they're going to be having, like, people fighting in the street, if I'm not mistaken. Or having, like, these little, not battles, but, like, these little blaster lightsaber fights. I don't know if that's misinformation. I don't know who the heck I was talking to about that, but I just remember someone telling me that.
So what I'm going to assume they're going to do is have the mini, like, Phasma March that we currently have in Tomorrowland and in Hollywood Studios, as well as maybe have another show to replace Trials of the Temple, which is a Star Wars show currently showing at Tomorrowland. So I can totally see them having like a new story element where kids can come and interact, maybe use like a blaster instead of a lightsaber now. That'd be pretty cool. But I did also hear about, the new lightsaber technology that they're going to be using when this land opens. So
Okay, well, and that would be pretty sweet. Are we going to address the big spoiler old canon elephant in the room with the Grisks here, or do we want to leave that as a tease for our upcoming book club?
No, we can talk about that. I think we should talk about the new information, because the speculation subreddit is hot about it, so we should.
Okay. Well, I've got my love of the Vong. Everyone knows I'm a big post ROTJ old canon fan. So do you want me to save that for last, or should I go ahead and take a swing?
Just do it.
All right. The Grisks are totally Vong. They're absolutely the Uzon Vong, and I couldn't be happier. New canon Vong. I couldn't be happier. Now, for those not familiar with the Vong, they come from the old canon. And what was going on before they showed up was fall fairly safe. Leia, Han, Luke, the crew would show up, they'd go on an adventure, and they'd all be nice and safe, tucked into bed in time for dinner. Everything would be fine. There was no element of danger. The Vong were introduced. They were very alien in a universe of aliens. They came from outside the galaxy, All of their technology was organic, it was grown, and most importantly, they were immune to the Force. They existed entirely outside the Force, and this made them able to 1v1 a Jedi fairly easily. And they really were a massive threat all across the universe. The book series that they were a part of was contributed by like 20 plus authors, and it affected every character in the galaxy. And it added a real sense of danger. Now, obviously, because they messed with the nature of the Force and they killed off a number of important characters like Chewbacca, they were a controversial element to the story. But I liked them, and I liked their arrival because they really spiced things up. And reading about the Grisks in Thrawn, it seems pretty obvious to me that they are the Vong, but toned down. Because obviously they can be affected by the Force, because there's that moment when Vader's walking down the hallway, Rogue One style, just chucking them against walls. So obviously the Force affects them, but they one of the key things about the Vong was because they didn't have the Force, they would capture Jedi and dissect them and torture them and shake the Force out of them. How does the Force work? Tell us what is this magic? And that's what they're doing in this book, is they're kidnapping Jedi children to use them and torture them, and among other things, use them to navigate through uncharted territory in space. And so it feels like they are the Vong, but toned down so that they don't dominate the story like the old canon Yuuzhan Vong did. Now, Lai, you said you haven't read the Thrawn trilogy yet, and so as someone who's not familiar with the Yuuzhan Vong and their effect on the old canon, what was your take on them?
I thought they were a cool new side to this war, especially because they studied Imperial ships, Imperial tactics, and armory. So I thought that was pretty cool that, could kind of shook up Vader and Thrawn, that someone outside of this war is studying them. And I thought that because they were, I wouldn't say they were competent, but they were prepared. They were prepared to transport these Chiss children. They were prepared to attack the Chimera and Thrawn's people and Vader's people. So I thought it was pretty cool that Vader and Thrawn's forces weren't so OP. You know what I mean? And that the Gris, they put up a fight. They put up a fight, and in the end, spoiler, they got away. But I like them, honestly, and I think they totally change the new canon and what we are going to expect story-wise from here on out.
Yeah, I do like the idea of them. I completely agree that kind of objective, removed perspective of studying the Empire, kind of giving us a look of the galaxy from someone who's not deep in the trenches in the middle of it, was definitely refreshing. Todd, did you have any thoughts on where they might be able to go with them, or what implications they might have?
Yeah, like you said, the comparisons with the Vong is what first comes to mind. Yeah, they do feel like toned down. They're not from another galaxy. They're from the unknown regions. They lose the Force immunity, I think, type thing. But looking like they might serve a similar purpose if they do go forward with them invading the galaxy, or at least having a large-scale war in the unknown regions, which, like we said before on the podcast, or at least I think I have, there's a lot going on in the unknown regions that they've been hinting at and setting up for some material to cover, and this just keeps on adding to that, building up the unknown regions with the Chiss, and now these new players in the game.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if they're going to be incorporating them into the future media. It'd be nice to see them, but I feel like anywhere they show up, if they're even remotely as powerful as the Vong were, they would just dominate. But maybe they could find a balance. Liz, do you see them going anywhere with them? Or did you have any ideas about them?
I'm hoping that they incorporate them into movies so we can see them interact with some new characters. So if they do decide to make them as, or like a little less powerful than in the old canon books, we can actually see some action with them. I think that would be very interesting. But no, I loved the new take on the Vong in this book. Yeah, it was pretty interesting to see what they were doing to the children, and it was just like so intense. And I was like, for a book, like, this is getting pretty good. It's getting spicy up in here, like these new alien species. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that books sometimes have a problem with is that they played a little too safe, where they don't want to get too close to the affecting the universe at large. They want to be self-contained so that they're not at danger of stepping on the toes of other of other mediums, of other people's books and other people's comics, but them introducing the Grisks is clearly him going, look, I'm introducing this element to the universe, and it is going to affect everyone else. I like that he didn't mind stepping in like that.
Yeah, I think it was like the newest information we got, you know, in this new canon that hasn't already been touched on. So I don't know. It's such a cool. It was such a cool like twist at the end of this book, and I feel like it gave the book so much more value because it sparked a lot of imagination going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. As the name implies, unknown regions. You never know what they could pull out of there, and it's left purposely ambiguous for their own writing's sake. They've given themselves this big opening from which they could draw whatever they want, and it would still be more or less believable or at least acceptable. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to what they have to bring to the table with the Grisk slash Vong, and what they could do to the galaxy at large, especially after the Skywalker saga is over. Yeah, now Todd, you had mentioned in your notes that what was that word? It was something about the word that became Skywalker that was somehow important to Thrawn.
The name of what they call the Chiss Force Sensitive, usually apparently young girls that do the navigation for them, they call them the Skywalkers, or I believe it translates in basic to Skywalkers.
I'm looking at the original word
like
now, and I will give you $20 if you can pronounce it in a believable way, like their word for it.
It looks like Auxili Assemble.
Auxili Assemble.
I think that's correct, is it? Someone pull up the audiobook.
For those who don't have for those who aren't hardcore Star Wars nerds like ourselves, the word it's Oxylyesembo. So yeah, that might be the best crack we can take at it. But like you said, it's. I mean, are there implications there? Greater implications to the universe or to the Chiss at least?
I think it was interesting to see that we have like Force sensitives being put to uses outside of the Jedi. Outside the Jedi and the Sith, they're like doing their own thing, and it's also interesting to see how it affects the different species because they only regain their abilities for a short time as children, and the only real thing they can do is have the foresight. They call it the second sight, second vision, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was second sight.
Yeah. The seeing things before they happen type deal. That, like Anakin could do
Like
as a kid.
reflexes.
Yeah,
Like
the
Jedi
reflexes. And that was really interesting. And again, we have the possible origins of the word Skywalker, or Anakin's last name. So is Shmi a Chiss?
She is a Chiss, confirmed. Canon. Someone get Pablo on the horn. That's it.
Yeah.
100% confirmed.
It's confirmed.
Oh
does
my gosh.
so much sense.
Was
It makes
Anakin's
too
real
much
father
sense.
That's why
It
he's so
makes too much
handsome.
sense.
Because Thrawn is his father.
100% confirmed. Chiss Shmi confirmed for Smash.
I love that Thrawn revealed that to Vader. Especially that, like, when Thrawn was saying that when he met Anakin, that, like, he was taken aback because Skywalker meant something to the Chiss. And so, it's just so funny how much, like, Vader denies that he's Anakin, but yet, like, every other moment, Thrawn's like, dog, I know it's you. Like, it's fine. Like, we've been through this. But, and I like how, I just wanted to add this as one of my last favorite things is when, Thrawn made Vader reflect about trust. And, like, it was just so weird, like, Vader, like, philosophically thinking about, like, trusting Thrawn and what that meant and, like, if he was really worthy of it. And it was just, like, that it wasn't the murderer Vader. It was, like, the person inside Vader, like, having a thought about something, emotional. So that was another favorite moment of mine.
Yeah, we got a lot of Vader in here, and it's a little bit different than what we've gotten before, especially in that aspect. And you brought this up a little bit, but one of the things I saw a lot of people talking about before this book came out was Thrawn knowing if Vader was Anakin or figuring that out. And I like the way they handled it, where Thrawn just casually, like, acts like I know you're Anakin, all this. And especially at the ending where he was, like, finally confirmed to Thrawn was like when Vader was doing his
Oh,
move
yes, I love
in
the
the TIE
battle scene
Defender,
of the
which
book.
was again a really fun part I liked about the ending, the fight scene. The battle scene was the highlight of the book for me, and where Vader does the thing where he does like his spinning maneuver, and Thrawn was just like he recognizes like that's Anakin's
Well,
thing.
Thrawn is a tactical genius. He knows what a good trick spinning is.
You should
Yeah.
try spinning. It's a good trick.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, do we have any other neat notes or final thoughts on Thrawn or?
Oh, I have one. This one time where Vader was thinking about like how to kill Thrawn, and like they were having this like really cute banter back and forth, and Thrawn is like, "Do you expect me to believe that a tactician of your skill has not thought of a way to kill me?" And it's like another faint smile. I have in fact thought of 3 ways.
I love
Oh,
it.
it's so good.
Oh my
That's so
gosh,
good.
I know. I loved it. Oh, and I loved when Thrawn and Anakin first meet, and Thrawn keeps correcting Anakin how to say his name
Thrawn
correctly.
Road.
That was
Yeah.
so stupid.
Their
I
banter
love
was just amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of cute moments there. I think one that I remember from the Thrawn and Anakin one was where Thrawn was it was actually like the fight, and then Thrawn was like, "So you are a Jedi then?" And Anakin's like, "How'd you figure that out?" Thrawn said that they have legends of 2 Force users, like the Sith and the Jedi. That like the Sith are reputed to be legendary warriors, and kind of just got like surprised and overread, and he's like, "Well, you're certainly not a Sith then."
Yeah.
Just like low-key burning him so hard.
Yeah, I do. They do seem to be. Zahn seems to be kind of comfortable and stretching out. Finally,
Yeah.
give Thrawn a little bit of a sense
Yeah.
of humor, like the trolling him with his name and constantly poking Vader. Oh, you're totally Anakin. You're not Anakin, but you're totally Anakin. Just kind of poking him a little bit.
I
It's
have
nice to see a little sense of
that
humor out of him.
moment right here pulled up. It says, "For a long moment they stood together in silence. Vader thought about his secret, about Thrawn's loyalty, about the Emperor's continued need for him, perhaps the entire Empire's need for him. Anakin Skywalker is dead," he said. Thrawn lowered his head. "I know." It's just so...
Claps.
With your copyright strike. I just thought that was a really nice way. That's literally like the second page
Yeah.
to the end. I thought it was really nice that he wasn't pushing it anymore, and Thrawn was just like, "Okay, like,
Right.
you say so."
Well, if we got nothing else on Thrawn, Liz, I think you have a message for the community.
So in the community segment, you can go to Star Wars Speculation subreddit and leave us comments, questions, concerns, and maybe just talk about this episode. Go ahead and find the thread and go ahead and start talking about it. And then we have our most beloved section, The World Between Worlds. And today it is a dogfight between Poe Dameron and Darth Vader. Who would win? With Vader? Vader.
This seems unfair.
Yeah,
Vader.
Vader.
But
think
he
Poe is
has
a-
the Force
Vader
tree
wins
on
that.
his side.
Poe is a peak
The
human
Force tree
pilot, but
on
Vader
his
is...
side.
The Force tree. Oh, yes.
I think Poe... Has Poe ever spun?
But has he
Yeah, but does
accessed
he
it
know
yet?
spinning?
Did he spin? He did do a U-turn.
I don't
Try
think-
doing
I
a
mean, he did
U-turn. It's a
He
good
did a
trick.
U-turn. A pretty cool
Yeah,
U-turn.
he did a U-turn, but is that technically spinning?
Oh my
Oh
god.
my gosh.
Yeah. Well, that was technically a spin, but on the wrong axis, so he almost
What
got
about
it.
Poe versus Poe versus Jedi Knight Anakin, like ROTS?
I think Anakin would
Yeah.
still
Anakin
beat
still-
him. Yeah.
Here's the way to look at it, is that Obi-Wan Kenobi himself admits that he's a terrible pilot, but with the Force, he is able to be on par with Jango in Episode 2, just with the Force alone.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So the Force is just this massive cheat code when it comes to flying.
I mean, he was still struggling, though. Obi.
Yeah, I mean, he was
So-
struggling, but he, no,
I mean, like,
yeah,
he's not perfect.
yeah, but he outran him. He tricked him into thinking he had beaten him. I mean, he was pretty much, he lasted a
true.
while against Jango.
It was
and
just
he
his
admits that
Jedi
he's
wits,
terrible
not
at
his flying. It was his Jedi
That
wits.
must have been it. That must have been it. It's that winning smile.
Yeah.
But do you think without the Force, Anakin would be as good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
You know,
because he
it's-
used to work on like the pod racers and like I'm pretty
yeah,
sure he
true.
would have like tried to find like some simulators like and just spend like all his time trying to fly.
Like Ray.
Yeah, like Ray.
Or Han.
Yeah, or Han. Mhm.
Yeah, I've always had this obsession with the pilots. You know, Rogue Squadron for the longest time was my favorite part of Star Wars, the books and the games. And I love Wedge and I love Tycho and Corrin and all the great Rebel pilots, but man, Poe, especially in the movies, is so absurdly good. He's so absurdly overpowered. I watched an analysis of him in The Force Awakens when he's fighting over Takodana, and he didn't waste a single shot. And not
Yes.
only did he do full transitions on multiple axes, he was doing K turns, he was doing Alderaan rolls. He was also picking off ground infantry in key points around the castle. I mean, it's absurd what he was able to do compared to what should have been top tier pilots like Luke and Wedge in the original trilogy. So, I mean, if we're comparing him to other pilots in the series, he's the best without the Force. But then there's the
Yeah.
Force.
Force tree.
Force tree.
Yeah. He definitely might have some,
Force ability.
like,
I-
a little bit of
100%
sensitivity.
believe he has force sensitivity. That is just he is just so good at everything he does except for his
His
being,
parents were pilots, right?
Huh?
Was his parents pilots or just his dad?
I think they were just like fighters, no?
His,
Shattered
Oh,
Empire?
his parents were both
Oh, okay.
pilots, or at least his mother was.
Nice.
Force tree.
Yeah.
So I guess it's settled.
Well, I
later.
mean, you got to think about it. In Vader Down, the
Ballpark
comic
Vader.
opens with
This
him
wasn't much of a
going
fight.
1v36. It's like he takes on 3 entire squadrons of X-wings and Y-wings
Yeah.
and just smokes all of them.
Vader Down. Yeah, if you ever need to see how OP Vader is, just read Vader Down.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, weird.
if that's settled, then Vader would blow Poe out of the
Everyone
sky.
has Vader.
Then unless anyone else has any topics they want to throw into the mix before we close out.
I think they would. Okay, Poe would stand like a little bit of a chance.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
maybe try to pull some moves on Vader, but then Vader'd be like, and then just like, yeah.
Do you think Poe would disarm Vader with his his jokes and?
Probably. Hey, you got asthma there?
I know, just talk.
I don't know. You say that, but Vader's got a little bit of a sense of humor himself. Like when,
Yeah,
when
he
he's,
does.
Don't choke on your aspirations,
Yes,
director.
my-
and then,
Favorite Vader line ever. Ever.
Oh.
It is such an Anakin thing to say, and I love it. It was so good. I literally screamed when I heard him say that because it was so funny.
and, I mean, even in the original trilogy, I think it was Piet, and he goes right after choking him, he goes, "Apology accepted." So he's definitely
Yeah.
got that snark.
He does.
So maybe
Yeah.
maybe instead of a starship battle, we could just have them on mics, just
Yes.
snarking off at each other,
Roasted.
This session.
like a rap battle or something. But that's not this
Yeah,
podcast.
that's not
that's
this.
someone else.
If you liked what you heard, hop a lift down to level 1313, the seedy underbelly of the internet, known as Reddit, where you can find us at our Star Wars speculation. Be sure to check out our YouTube Kessel Fun podcast, where you can subscribe to us and click the little bell to be the first to know when new episodes are up. If you enjoyed this episode, you will give it a like. We're also available on SoundCloud, Pocket Cast, and iTunes as Kessel Fun Podcast. If you have any questions for us or topics you'd like to hear us cover, hit us up on Twitter at Kessel Fun. See you around, kid.